Pleasure to welcome our Reverend Paul Johnson, who will be speaking to us today about money and the meaning of life, an excellent topic.
D.H. Lawrence presented his view of money in a story about a fictional family in a piece entitled The Rocking Horse Winner, which I read many years ago. I quote, although they lived in style, they felt always an anxiety in the house. There was always the grinding sense of the shortage of money. So the style was always kept up, and so the house came to be haunted by the unspoken phrase, there must be more money. There must be more money. The children could hear it all the time, though nobody said it out loud. And then one of the children, a son, with the encouragement and counsel of the gardener, began to bet on the horses. And he turned a tiny amount of money into a pretty good sum and had that money given to his mother anonymously. Quote, then something very curious happened. The voices in the house suddenly went mad, like a chorus of frogs on a spring evening. Debts were paid off, new luxuries were bought, and yet the parents' voices simply trilled and screamed in a sort of ecstasy. There must be more money. Oh, there must be more money. There must be more money. I suppose that was his viewpoint, that when you get more, you still want more. Well, that wasn't the case in my family growing up, the second part of that story. But the first part reminded me quite a bit of my family growing up, which involved 6 children and 2 parents. We had clothes, and we had shelter, and we had food, but no extras. You know, there were no vacations, only going to family at some distance for vacation. And my dad was a minister in the evangelical church that was getting a pretty modest salary. And my parents were perpetually in debt, always $1,000 behind. They were funded by household finance, basically a payday loan service that they kept borrowing on, I'm sure, year after year until the kids were out of the house and my mother was able to get a job. And then they had a good deal more financial freedom, but that was many years to come. But I remember how every Christmas Eve, church would have a love offering for my father as a minister. And after the service, they'd give this money to him in cash. And I remember him counting it on the kitchen table and hoping that it would cover the most pressing bills. And often my parents would be discussing, which bill has to be paid this month and which can be put off. And so they didn't share this directly with us, this anxiety, but it was in the house. There must be more money. There has to be more money. That element of scarcity. And then also, of course, my view of money was additionally affected by the fact of that my grandparents and parents and great aunts had gone through the Depression. And I heard their stories. My father was raised by an aunt and uncle because his mother died just shortly after he was born, and they lost their grocery business in the Depression. My mother's father was a painter. He lost his job, and the only way they survived was by taking in boarders until WPA came along and her father got a job working as a painter for the government. And then it was still touch and go in terms of money. And so as a child, I wondered, another depression could come at any time. What should I do? Get more money. And so I started at a young age earning money. But also, I didn't take up playing the horses in order to supplement my father's income. But we had some hopes because my father took on a second job, working early morning as a school bus driver. 7:30, he would, or even before 7:30, he'd get out there and get the kids to school. And then he'd be back at his office at church the normal time. So he wasn't taking time away from the church. And we were so hopeful that more money would be coming in. However, the church board found out about it. They said, Reverend Johnson, people in the community will think that we aren't paying you enough. You have to stop that job. So he quit that job, and our hopes for more money as a family were dashed. So as I say, I started to raise some funds for myself. I sold greeting cards and Christmas cards door to door. I think I was like 12 when I started that. Can you imagine? Maybe even earlier, and was pretty successful at it. I sold religious and patriotic mottos, sort of miniature tapestries door to door. I helped the church custodian for 60 cents an hour. When I was old enough, I took on 3 paper routes. Grit, Milwaukee Journal, Sunday paper, and the Kenosha Evening News. 3 paper routes. I shoveled snow in the winter, and I mowed lawns in the summer. Before long, I had saved up $300. And my father opened a savings account for me at the bank. Unfortunately, at one point, he was faced with a cash crunch and he emptied out my account. I was devastated and angry. But over time, he replaced it, and I went on to save a total of $1,600 by the time I went to college, our church college in Chicago. With some scholarships and the money I had saved, and eventually government loans and working part-time, I made it through college and 1 year of evangelical seminary with not too much government debt, some, but a good deal of work to finance my way through college. As a janitor and working in a printing firm and so forth, I was able to avoid taking on too much debt, I thought. Now, I've titled my sermon this morning, Money and the Meaning of Life. My goal up to that point of going through 1 year at the seminary and graduating from college was, the monetary goal was to finance that education so that I could go out and save souls. My goal in life was, I guess, encapsulated in that old hymn, a charge to keep I have. A charge to keep I have, a God to glorify, a never-dying soul to save, and fit it for the skies. Fit it for heaven. Not only myself, but for other people. That was a goal, and money was that goal for my meaning and purpose in life. But my college years and my year at seminary robbed that meaning for me. I no longer believe in a traditional heaven and hell based on a particular belief about Jesus. My sense of meaning was gone. How was it going to be replaced? And so I went for a long time searching for a meaning. I after going to seminary, I went 2 years to graduate school in history at the University of Minnesota, again, financed by work and by some government debt. And then I discovered Unitarian Universalism and decided to prepare for the UU ministry by going to Meadville Lombard, the UU school at the University of Chicago. After, though, I had worked 4 years in student affairs work at the University of Minnesota Duluth. And I saved like crazy because I knew I wanted to go back to graduate school in something. And I saved $16,000, which was a princely sum. So I went off to study, and I didn't know if I was going to be a minister for sure, but I knew I wanted to settle some of these religious questions by studying religion at the University of Chicago. And what a wonderful experience that was, because I didn't have to worry about money. I got a part-time job working as a director of student activities for the Hyde Park Consortium of Theological Schools, a wonderful opportunity. And with that, and living very, very frugally after my 2 years to get my doctorate of ministry degree, because I was given credit for my previous graduate work, I still had $16,000. And I said that would tie me over until I get my first church, which indeed it did. But I still was faced, how can I encapsulate my purpose, my meaning in life? And so I've looked at this in a number of different ways. The first person to really help me was the Dalai Lama in his book, The Art of Happiness. Quote, he said, "I believe that the very purpose of life is to seek happiness, that it is clear whether one believes in religion or not, whether one believes in this religion or that religion, we are all seeking something better in life. So I think the very emotion of our life is towards happiness." Now he goes on to claim this isn't a Pollyanna view, that, but it's one of discipline. It is best achieved by maximizing happy emotions and by eliminating those emotions that lead to suffering. Of course, that's the core Buddhist tenet. And of course, he believes that the core of every person is a Buddha nature that is compassionate. And when we seek to live compassionately toward others and really don't give place to anger and hatred, then we live happily, according to the Buddhist Eightfold Path. And I found that very congenial. It wasn't positing pie in the sky or heaven to come. It was positing life in the here and the now. And that was helpful. He goes on, I heard him say this in person when I heard him speak when I was in India a number of years ago, that you should be positively, think positively when you come upon an enemy or someone hindering you, because this gives you an opportunity to practice compassion and you'll become much better at it. Isn't that interesting? And of course, he had to do that in regards to the Chinese. That was a total challenge in his life because of the enemy status of the Chinese versus the Tibetans. So that's been something I've been thinking about for a long time. And then I got into the whole positive psychology movement, really headed by Martin Seligman, professor at the University of Pennsylvania, who said that happiness is and sense of well-being is our human goal. And there are components of it. One, of course, is pleasure and comfort. Boy, the comfort I felt when I had that $16,000 and didn't have to worry about keeping body and soul together. That's true. I will say that about money. I think of people who don't have health insurance, who don't have job security, or who have very low income, that gnawing of sense of insecurity is something that is terrible. And money is a partial remedy for that. He said the second aspect of happiness in life is engagement. The depth of involvement with one's family, one's work, with romance, with hobbies, is a second element of it. And he buttresses all of this with empirical research over many, many years. And the third is meaning, or using personal strength to serve some larger end that one has determined. And that has been at the center of my attention regarding happiness as well. And I found a role for this in my ministry and being a Unitarian Universalist. I agree with our purposes and principles and giving them life within a community, of a congregation and wider society, a sense of meaning. And then I read Jacob Needleman's book, wonderful book, Money and the Meaning of Life. He died just this last fall in November, but he was professor of philosophy at San Francisco State University. And he found that there's a close relationship between our deepest moral and spiritual values and how we expend our money. And that it's a gauge of what our deepest values are. I wasn't going to put this in, but I'm reminded of this joke of a fellow who's dying, and he says to his family, it's often said that you can't take it with you, but I'm going to try. I want you to monetize my assets, and I want you to put them in my coffin, because maybe you can take it with you. So they did that, and he was buried with his money, and he gets up to St. Peter's gates, and he said, "Look at St. Peter. I've got my money to take in with me." And St. Peter said, "Sorry, money doesn't count here. It's receipts." It's how you spent your money counts, not how much money you have. But he tells two stories in his book that have stayed with me. One involved him. He taught this course, Money and the Meaning of Life, and which was well received by students at San Francisco State. But there were two students in the class that came up, and they had significant questions and issues. He was talking with me. He said, "Well, why don't you come to my apartment, and we'll discuss these things further. You're both really interested, and I think we could spend some time together to further clarifying these points." So they came, and they had this sort of extra seminar. And at one point, this the young man, who was an heir to a significant fortune, went out to his car, and he came back with gold ingots. And he said, "Professor Needleman, your course has meant so much to me, and I want to present this to you." And Needleman said it was $500,000 worth of gold. And he said when that young man gave him that money, electricity coursed through his whole body. What he could possibly do with that money. But he realized, according to his moral standards, he really couldn't accept it. This fellow was a little bit mentally unstable, and it wouldn't just be ethically right for him to do that. And so he regretfully said, "I just can't accept this gift," because of his spiritual values. And he told another story. I think this is where I read it, but it's always stuck with me, that Salvador Dali and Mia Farrow had a relationship at one point. I don't know if it was romantic or what it was, but he was much taken with the fact that she was so high on animal rights. And so he devised this beautiful vase. And he painted the vase in a Salvador Dali design in a beautiful way. But in the bottom of the vase, he had a little compartment with a live mouse. And he gave it to Mia as a gift. She was angry, and she took this priceless Salvador Dali original, went across the street to Central Park, and smashed it so the mouse could escape. Her value did not allow her to accept that priceless piece of art. Now, when I read these, I said, now, isn't there some way he could have justified taking at least part of that gold? Or wasn't there some way that Mia Farrow could have gone to a glass specialist and cut a little hole in the bottom of that vase so that mouse could get out? Did any of you think of that? Yeah. But his whole point was, it's a very individualistic thing, that our core values come out in the way that we deal with money. 10 years, no, it was, 2010, it'll be 13 years ago, that David Kahneman and Angus Deaton came out with their book on happiness and money. It's always said money can't buy happiness. And so this got a lot of play and continues to get a lot of play, their research, which, a lot of happiness research is our questionnaires are, how do you feel this day? Or how do you feel yesterday? But they used a wider net, which I like. What is your life satisfaction and how do you rank it, on a scale? And they said happiness involves in loving, stable relationships, such as a loving family, having your basic needs met, and an annual salary of $75,000. When you go above $75,000, your happiness in terms of money peaks. And so that was big news. Of course, what would that be now with inflation? Be over 100,000. If you're in New York City, it would be much more, wouldn't it? But and I thought, well, that's interesting. So that, and I would testify to that a certain amount of money makes a lot of difference. It would have made a lot of difference to my parents. Just a bit more money. And if we had an annual income guarantee to people of a certain amount, of course, some people would blow the money, but a lot of people would give them security and a sense of safety in life. And I remember at the same time, I read that study. I read another study that was done, which on life satisfaction. And I thought this was very interesting. There was a ranking from 1 to 7 as to how satisfied you are with your life. And they went to the Forbes magazine, you know, how they had the 500 wealthiest, and their average was 5.8 of 7. They went to Pennsylvania Amish, and there they were 5.8 as well. Quite a disparity of income there, right? By hundreds of percent. They went to Inuit people in northern Greenland. They were at 5.8. They went to the African Maasai tribe. They were at 5.7. A Swedish sample was 5.6. An international college sample from 47 nations was 4.9. Illinois Amish was 4.9. Calcutta slum dwellers was 4.6. Fresno, California homeless was 2.9. And Calcutta homeless people were 2.9. Street dwellers in Calcutta. But so when you go all the way up to the, you know, millionaires or to billionaires, their life satisfaction wasn't that great than the Inuit of northern Greenland at 5.8. And then recently I came across the work of Liz Dunn, a professor of social psychology at the University of British Columbia, and Michael Norton, a professor of business administration at Harvard Business School. And they've been studying happiness for more than a decade. And they said part of the reason that people with more money are happier isn't just the size of their bank account, it's how they use their money to generate happiness. And generally they found it's because of social opportunities. He said, you know, you tend to buy things thinking this is going to be great. This will be the greatest couch I've ever had. I've always wanted it. But after a while, it becomes your old couch, right? He said, but he said, even the happiness derived from something like a movie depends on how you approach it. Are you buying a Blu-ray to store on your collection shelf, or are you watching it with friends and then heading to a bar to discuss it? They said that even casual interactions with other people make us much more happy than sitting by ourselves in a room. So they point out the importance of social interaction and social connection for a sense of life satisfaction. Then also, their studies show that more people, that people are happy when they give to others. The more they give, the happier they tend to be. And they had one experiment of this. They gave a certain amount of people money to two different groups. One half, they said, we want you to go out and spend this on yourself today. And the other half, we want you to go and give this money away in a way that you think would be appropriate. And those that gave the money away had a much greater sense of satisfaction and happiness than those that didn't. And I'm always interested in the research that has shown that people who are active in religious congregations tend to be happy and more civically engaged than either religious unaffiliated adults or inactive members of religious groups. And this has been shown out in many studies, but the latest one that I read was by the Pew Research Center. And you know, these are correlational studies. They're not necessarily causative. You know, it might be that happier people just are those who naturally go more to church and congregate with others. But don't take a chance. Don't take a chance. Come to church and support this congregation. Now, so for hope and well-being and life satisfaction, happiness, I suggest you support this congregation and support Unitarian Universalism and like-minded institutions, even in your legacy planning, something that will live on beyond you, as this building and these facilities live on beyond those who came before all of us. And of course, these buildings, these grounds are in need of help. The parking lot and driveway are not in that great shape. They need a love. There's a good deal of painting that needs to be done. Notice that first time I came to this church, boy, they really need some painting here on the outside of them. And of course, things were have been a low ebb since the pandemic and later. And I know Phyllis has really been the church janitor. And we have somebody, we've hired a housekeeper that has to be paid for. And so all these will increase. But I'm thinking now in terms of Marty Seligman, that if you give yourself over to something beyond yourself, you're likely to be happier and have a sense of satisfaction. If you invest a portion of your stored personhood in terms of your highest values, as suggested by Professor Needleman, your life will be enriched as well as the life of other people. So my wife and I, Carol, we're increasing our pledge from $1,000 to $1,100 to this congregation for this coming year. And we're also, of course, we also pledged to our home congregation back in Long Island. So the whole aspect of, I guess, money and the meaning of life relates to the whole issue of stewardship, how we use our gifts in the service of life, according to our highest values, our highest experiences, and the needs and possibilities of other people. And I love that piece by Rebecca Parker, formerly president of our seminary, Dark King, out in Berkeley. But she wrote once, "Your gifts, whatever you discover them to be, can be used to bless or curse the world. The mind's power, the strength of the hands, the reach of the heart, the gift of speaking, listening, imagining, seeing, waiting, any of these can draw down the prison door. Hoard bread, abandon the poor, obscure what is holy, comply with justice or withhold love. Comply with injustice or withhold love. You must answer the questions. What will you do with your gifts, including your monetary gifts? Choose to bless the world. Choose to bless the world and have a sense of satisfaction and be happy and have a sense of meaning in life. So may it be. Amen.